Monday again. I'm back. You're back. Possibly in replay, possibly live. Okay, it makes no difference to me. It's still all zero. Trying to come in with as much or as little enthusiasm as I possibly can. I suppose just the right amount to match the day. You know what I mean? So let's get right into it. After we turn that blasted music down. Yeah, that's better. I think that works. Okay. So earlier on Twitter this week, I put up let me just cut this out, bring this down here. I put up a tweet, as you do on Twitter, right? And got a couple of interesting responses. And I wanted to kind of talk about those a little bit. You know what? Let me put it here because I am beneath this. All right. So, I was thinking a lot about how people view comics nowadays. I think there's a lot of nostalgia involved, a lot of romanticism involved with comics, especially, for people where, that was really all they had growing up. Comics. They didn't have a whole lot of friends. Maybe they were in the middle of nowhere, but they had a gas station or something like that. They could go get a few issues of, your latest DC or Marvel. And I think that's one reason that those characters are so, loved, is because so many kids had them during their childhood, and then of course the movies and stuff came along. But at times I notice it seems like we're clawing and just desperately trying to get back to that feeling as like we were when we were kids. We're reading this stuff, and when you get older, eventually, it stops becoming like American myths, and it starts becoming more like, how the sausage is made, basically. Like, there are writers and there are artists and inkers and colorists and editors and letterers and stuff that make these books, and sometimes they're quirky, sometimes they're weird, sometimes they're very kind, sometimes they're horrible people. It's just kind of the nature of the game when it comes to creative people. But I think when I see some of these crowdfunding books, that they're really trying to still replicate that monthly kind of leave it on a cliffhanger sort of thing. They see the examples of the things that they loved, and I almost feel like some of them, mind you, want to replicate that like whole hog, like the whole thing, that whole experience of what they had when they were little. It's because you never know. Maybe it's going to be a nostalgia trip for somebody else, or maybe it's going to be like a nostalgia or something for a new kid. But that disadvantage being, a lot of times these crowdfunders are year apart, 2 years apart, and those were monthlies, those were weeklies, and in some cases with the comic strips, those were dailies. Little kids got, or whoever you might be, got your fix every week for a lot of stuff, or day, and that's just not the reality of it now. And hey, Peep, welcome to the chat box. And nowadays, I do notice a lot of pining to get back to what we were at, but maybe it's a worldwide thing, with the exception of manga, of course. Maybe it's a worldwide thing, or manga in France, apparently. But I feel like comics themselves are becoming sort of it's a very, very specific hobby. You look at, like, on YouTube, even, like, you look at movies, movie channels, you look at movie and TV channels, you look at gaming channels. Holy cow, they're massive. They're ridiculously huge. And some of the biggest comic book channels I found, there's got to be a few others, but like you got like that Comic Tropes, and then Ethan, which is like 148,000, and 180,000, something like that. Not huge in terms of that's barring, of course, official stuff like DC or Marvel, which they're mostly like overall. Okay, Comic says Kickstarter floppies end up being the slowest and most expensive comics ever. Yeah, and I, obviously when you're going to pay a certain amount of money, which is with crowdfunding quite a bit more expensive, floppies become a very difficult thing unless you're doing something like Alterna Comics does and offering like 5 to 8 to 10 floppies each time, and they do that because they're so dang affordable. But if you were doing it like even more expensive, like $40-$50 for that's a tough sell. And as Pete points out, like postage is the thing too. Excuse me, one moment. There we go. Forgot my dear opening, but it doesn't stop people from trying. And the purpose of this post was, I think that we've got to abandon at least some of that and keep it to our happy memories. Aaron says here, I think when times get strange or uncomfortable, people will always look for the good old days of nostalgia of the years past. It might be short-lived, but it does tend to keep recurring. And he's not wrong. That's not just comics and stuff like that. I mean, even it's just a point of familiarity. Sometimes when you have addicts, like drug addicts or alcoholics, or something like some example like that, they relapse sometimes when things get difficult or stressful. They go back to something that's more familiar to them, even if they know it's not a great place to be. But comics have that kind of magic to them, especially for us growing up with them, where we would kind of retreat into that world and leave whatever it was that was going on for us behind, whether it's like job troubles or bullies, or the military used to read a lot of comics and stuff. But then again, back in the day, and Jason Sandberg says, vote with your dollars and live and let live. Yeah. Peep says also markup, etc. on books. For example, my book will cost around $3 to print, have to charge $6, or £3 to print, have to charge $6. Right. And I think, though, with the exception of manga, which is an industry in and of itself, I mean, they place it first and foremost. They have the weekly pieces, and then those weekly pieces get shuttled into a little book, and those get distributed all over the place. And like Rini was saying on Aaron's feed the other day, they take surveys, and if this book is consistently the bottom, it gets cut. There's no apologies. It's just, if it's not selling, it doesn't go. That's an industry that is doing it right, as far as we have readers. We need to be responsible to the readers. These are our top books. These are the ones that we continue with. These books do not work. People are saying they don't like them. Well, then we have to cut them off. It's a waste of paper. We could put something new out. We could put something different out. And their diversity in terms of story is absolutely insane. You can read books about guys playing golf, going to restaurants to eat, right alongside your kaijus and your horror books and your romance books and stuff like that. And we used to have that in America. We used to have that. Peep says, an artist making, say, 24-page black and white could be printed around the same, but a lot will, for a 60-page book, sell for 25. Yeah. Black and white's one of those weird things where it's I don't know, from what I've seen, unless it is a manga, people seem to have this weird thing with it. I like black and white a lot myself, but it doesn't seem to sell nearly as well as it would for color here. I don't know how it is over in Europe. Probably a bit different, because from what I understand, at least France is very, very big into all kinds of stuff, but they do that yearly model. There used to be there's a comics hierarchy where you have your daily stuff, and now that's kind of regulated to web comics. You have your weekly stuff, also sort of webcomic type stuff. You have your monthlies, which is still kind of our what we do to a point here. And then you got your yearlies, which is kind of what Europe does a lot with the albums, and what we kind of do in crowdfunding, right? Which I think, if you're going to adopt that yearly model, more the Euro model, like some people were saying, you got to have a complete story to back that up. and then just continue to make things in that world versus, like unless you're able to get stuff out very quickly. We're talking about like under a year apart. I think a good story, because people, it seems to be some sort of a weird kind of notion that like if you have a nice ending, a good ending to a good story, it's a great jumping off point and people will never ever come back again. You got to serialize it. You got to have a cliffhanger. You got to have a reason to come back. That might be true for a daily, a weekly, or even a monthly. Not so much a yearly, not in a time where attention spans are, this short. It kind of turns into the Mad Hatter Tea Party, with this constantly move down, everyone move down, making room for streaming. Oh my gosh, we're making room for movies. Move down. That's what it's like to live in this world these days. And with comics, it's a situation where, and I know most of us have a stack of books that we haven't read. Even though they're a year apart, we get a stack of books that we haven't read, because the thought of sitting down for some people and just sitting and reading and not doing anything is a hard thing, especially if you're a creative person. You're thinking, I could be drawing, I could be practicing, I could be getting further in what I'm doing, or I have life that I have to deal with. Then I want to draw and practice. Reading for some it's a difficult thing. Once you sit down and do it, like it's you end up like doing it and probably enjoying yourself. But getting to that point where you can sit down in the chair for some, and sometimes that's me. I've been reading a lot more at night lately, before I go to sleep, and it's been working. But during the busyness of the day, sometimes it's like you've got to really convince yourself to stop. Just stop, have a seat in the chair for a few minutes and read. Right? Peep says, I understand paying artists, etc., but generally it's a huge markup. It's possible to make and sell a book every 3 months for around £6. Still profit. CG needs updating it. Well, yeah, that's the other problem, like getting that money up. But I mean, if you're somebody, and there are plenty of people in CG and crowdfunding that are like a one-man show, if you're doing it yourself and there's not a whole lot of overhead, you could possibly swing that. But it's gotta be good. I mean, you can't really do that if it's like really undercooked art and the writing isn't quite there. And I think that's also one reason Pete Samedi was talking about how he thinks it should be standard having, and I agree, you should have a little bit of the entire comic up. I know people tend to pay letterers later to do their stuff. But a couple of pages for marketing's sake. You should have a little something so they can see the writing too. But unless, to me that almost does say there's a lack of faith in the writing here and there sometimes. I mean, certainly if you've had a book out and you get people interested and they know what your writing's like, it might not necessarily be as detrimental for a person coming back. For a new person, we used to have, speaking of which, OK Comics says European comics are color-centric as American ones. They started publishing painted comics before US, and their painters were set to print high-quality books instead of periodicals. Right. Dr. Crow says, hello, Stato and chat. Hello. I got a final concept art for All American Red Squirrel, and she looks fantastic. The Grand British Gray Squirrel is also done. The art is on its pages soon. Wonderful to hear. Now, Amanda B, welcome to the chat, says, is that a UK thing though, Peep? I got Ed Gein and was surprisingly shocked at how cheap I paid. Got it shipped across seas. And yeah, Ed Gein's a bit of an outlier. I think Lucifer Storm's doing something a little bit different with that. But where was I? It'll come back to me. Let me look back up here for a second. £46, still profit. Yeah, somebody with the lower overhead could certainly possibly swing that a little easier. But I think, having a really good, memorable story versus having a cliffhanger. And if you get a situation where your team starts screaming at each other, you're left with a book with no ending, or a story with no ending. And if you have a situation where you just somewhere along the year, you just decide, I don't want to do this anymore. Comics aren't for me. Well, then you've got a cliffhanger thing here. So this was another tweet that I was thinking about earlier today. Earlier this week. On the internet, I see constantly comics have always been political. They're always been political. There's always politics in them. And they point to Captain America punching Hitler, something from the 40s. They point to maybe some Alan Moore stuff. And all these little like Batman fighting the KKK in the 70s or 80s. See, I always took that really different. I always thought they are political. To me, they've always been political, but then again, I know how the sausage is made, to again use that phrase. There's a lot of office politics, more so than usual, I think, in comics, because not only are you dealing with the business end, you're dealing with the creative layer on top of that. So you got a lot of egos dealing with this too. So, I mean, if one's not getting enough attention, that becomes a problem. Even if that person is maybe not as good, or if they're even better. Sometimes in comics, you can be not that great at your art, still get great jobs because of who you know. Or you can be amazing and you really not get a whole lot because of who you know. Unless you're trusting, you can be easily exploitable. Amanda says she paid about $13 total for Ed Gein. He did a lesser price point to get people hooked, and it was crazy low. Yes, he did. Does it vary by country? I guess as a fan, I never really looked at the business side of things. I think from what I heard Michael Bancroft talking about, like in France, it's something crazy, like 3 out of 5 books sold or comics, and they have these big shops with like all kinds of graphic albums, everything you can think of in there. Not, most of it doesn't even get translated and brought over here, from what I understand, but it's a big thing over there. And in Japan, it's like I said, really a big industry of just like put it out in magazines, put it out on digital and stuff. People can get their web comics, their normal stuff, and then that gets put into trades, and that gets thrown all over the place, and that's where we see it. And it just comes out at such a volume, it's almost like a conveyor belt. But here in America, it's a whole lot different. You have I think the Image, when I was watching this Image documentary, I think that went a long way in making sure that they wouldn't allow nobody to have these long grand runs like they used to. And I think that's one thing that the 70s, 80s, they used to have decent sized runs for people. And that got people hooked onto the artist, to what they were doing. And in manga, they have these ridiculous runs. I mean, the whole book by one person, it can be 40, 50, 60 volumes sometimes. I've seen at least 40. I mean, look at Dragon Ball Z, how long that's been running. But we don't have that here. We have, writers get decent runs, but artists, I feel like it's a fear. You know what I mean? Like especially if it's a writer artist, that's a fear that they're gonna get a huge following, and then they're gonna leave, and they're gonna take all that business with them, and it's going to hurt whatever the company is really bad. And that's another reason, crowdfunding is a great idea, because you have somebody that can do like a long run of books. It's just a situation where if you're doing it alone, it's going to take longer. If you've got a big team, well, it's going to be more expensive. Haven't cracked that yet, and I think the person that does is going to make a lot of money if they're able to get things out. But then, of course, it almost loses that mom and pop feel that so many of us like. These are special projects, boutique comics, low print run stuff. Never mind the collecting part of it. I'm not huge on collecting, but I mean, like, it's once it gets big, I feel like eventually they're going to have to start making some of the same decisions that the big corporations do, because when you turn around and all of a sudden you're employing 40 people, and these books have to work, and if they don't, you're either going to have to you're going to have to make these books work. Otherwise, you got to let people go, or you got to change the quality of your books, or something like that to keep up those margins. it all kind of falls in there. So let's look and see. We got Amanda says seems good unless the conversion rate makes 15 to 30. Yeah, I guess I'm prone to look at final cost, right? Peep says if you're streaming all the time, it takes ages. That's absolutely true, unless you're maybe drawing on stream or something like that. But not a lot of people do that because it doesn't tend to get as many views. If Amanda says if it takes less than normal price, I usually take a second looks and more apt to take a chance on something. Right, and that's where Alterna comes in beautifully. Okay, Comics says the American comic market produces disposable entertainment like manga, but wanted to be taken seriously as European ones. That's a fair point. Never really thought about it like that. Citizen Ronan, welcome. Hello. Says don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you very much. I'm terrible at doing that kind of thing. Yeah, that's true. I think the collector market, I mean, like when you've got a nice hardcover book, you're just putting it in your library kind of thing. But collector market for comic books, which are essentially just magazines, little magazines, I think it's really changed the game. Trying to make better paper, trying to make it last longer, but then at the same time, that thin little glossy paper, like it nicks and it bends and creases and stuff like crazy, which for collectors, of course, that's the death knell. I'm not a collector myself. I buy them to read them, put them in a box, pull them out every couple of years, different books and stuff, and read that. But I mean, I do like the books so that I can pop them on my shelf. I just pull those down for reference, for inspiration, just to read sometimes. So that's never been really me, the collector part of it. Peep says in the end, I just want newsprint, right? And that's I guess that's ideal in terms of. Well, from what I've heard, though, it's not exactly cheap nowadays, but it's not super expensive. The specifics of it are a little bit above me because it's either it's really cheap or it's not. I think because it's like trying to make a movie in black and white. It's cheaper to do it in color nowadays. When back in the day, of course, color was more expensive because we weren't set up for it. Now we're more set up for the glossy print type stuff. So the newsprint is quite a bit more uncommon. So that would probably make it a bit more expensive. Let's see here. Citizen Rona says, LOL. I think I swayed 2 votes. I do honestly love tuna melts. Oh, he's talking about Salmon Saturday. Oh boy. One of these days, Mrs. Stat's going to make me something for that. Dr. Crow says, I plan on making my books the same way Alterna does. I hope to get into Alterna, but if I don't, I can't see a way to do it better. Right. And hey, again, good luck with that. I hope you have a true pitch that follows all the rules and it gets Pete's attention. If not, just keep on trying. Sometimes you got to go back to the drawing board. Let me just remove this right here for a second. And then we'll just get back to this. I was working on this. And I'll just do this while I talk to you guys. And Peep's got his heart set on getting a story into Alterna too. I don't want to play. Yeah, Citizen Rana says he don't want to pay $25 for a floppy newsprint, and I think that's why going crowdfunding. You get the different paper, something that'll last a bit longer. Although newsprint lasts quite a long time. Oh, look at that! Speak of him, and here he pops up. Hi, Pete. Welcome to the chat. Hey, Wooly, welcome to the chat. Even y'all going to have to catch it on replay, heading out for a healthy walk. I support that. I'll probably have one maybe after the show. But, where was I? We talked about comics back. Going back to the beginning part, see, that variety is something that we had. We were set on moving towards what Japan does. Did somebody say Samedi 3 times? I think I did. We were set on doing what Japan does because in the 40s and the 50s, the 60s, around there, the 40s and 50s definitely, there was a heck of a a variety in comics. And believe it or not, I want to say at the time, little girl readers outweighed the little boy readers, just due to like there's so much in the romance was a huge market back then. Now, I think with the seduction of the innocent and getting rid of all the comics, cutting down on stuff, and superheroes becoming like 85 to 90% of what we do here, which is actually something the rest of the world is kind of like, take it or leave it. Because they still have, I mean, manga and Euro comics to a point still have that variety. Although I would say European stuff really skews towards fantasy and sci-fi. But they do have, some of the other stuff. We're getting there with crowdfunding and with web stuff. We're definitely getting there. But we had a heck of a setback. And I think that probably put, like, in the American mindset, sort of like comics are for kids, comics are for like, not for, like, there was this period where it was just kind of like, toss it in the trash, go get going and be an adult. Don't read superheroes all the time. That's for the nerds. But obviously there's a change in terms of different content. For people that just don't like superheroes, if that's all there was, just superhero stuff, you're gonna go, well, I guess comics aren't for me. But most people still read comic strips without thinking a single thing of it. I guess for some reason that didn't count. Gag strips specifically, like like you got like Zitz, Calvin and Hobbes, Baby Blues, For Better For Worse, that kind of stuff. The stuff that some of it arguably Garfield, some of it arguably should have ended a while ago, but it's still going because it's a brand. But people keep on reading it. And to them, I suppose that doesn't quite count as comics, because that's been with them since a little kid all the way to now. Whereas comics themselves had that huge gap cut, and going forward, you have to discover it yourself or be raised on it. And you notice little kids, they still love comics. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a store and I've seen some kid like riding in a cart with like a Dog Man or something like that, and they're just devouring it. The whole world doesn't exist at that point. They don't even realize they're in the cart. They're just like eyes wide reading through that. And if we can get back to that, comics will come back in a big way. But as it stands, it's like Scholastic I want to say Scholastic might be a bigger publisher at this point than Marvel and DC as far as books go. They're huge. Let's have a look. Hojo says, I got everything ready to go for Alterna, but Pete wouldn't want to commit to a 13-issue arc. I'll find someone who will. Well, that's what, if I ever did it, I'll tell you what I'd do. And we'll check out. We hear Pete talking to Amanda, talking to Hojo. He says he's looking for ongoing titles. Done with miniseries, limited series, and series title. Too many creators want to make a few issues. Don't want to do it anymore. Then flake out. Right. Okay, so OK Comics is European stuff is more geared towards adventure with lots of variety and setting, whereas Japan, they're really a comic for everything. That's right. And there's a little bit of a stigma here. And I suppose, like, if you've got your current model of people kind of just supporting the creator and getting the book, that could be okay for a bookmark for now. But as long as they read that book, I mean, if they buy it and just kind of toss it in the corner, that doesn't help anybody. If they read it and they start getting into it, then that's what's going to start things. Pete says, give me self-contained episodic storytelling with an overarching plot woven through. The stories all matter this way, but at the same time, if there's a dud issue, it doesn't break the story arc. Right, like a fill-in issue, like they used to do. Amanda says, I'm going to watch a Raina Tegemeyer. Oh, okay, Zoom meeting tomorrow. Not sure what she will talk about, but she's one of my daughter's favorites. That's right. Like Target in perpetuity almost sells her books. Like there's like a Smile one. I think they're like high school books, but they consistently sell. They've never come off the shelf. Not in all the years I've gone in there. They have never come off the shelf, which is an amazing thing. Dr. Crow says, welcome to the chat, by the way. Oh no, were you here either? Holy cow. No, you weren't. Oh yeah, you were. Of course you were. Okay, I'll say hello again then. Good thing I'm planning to write an All-American Red Squirrel till it runs out of ideas or dies. Citizen Rona says, I think comics industry dropped the ball the way the music industry dropped the ball with the internet, becoming complacent and thinking their model would always be there. You know, I think it's a little bit more like a just like a divesting of comics. Like I've heard it before where it's like, you know, we've got, why isn't this? Oh, I see what's going on. It's like we've got 80 years worth of stuff. We can just make TV and movies about this until the world ends. We don't need new things anymore, which is funny because people are sick and tired. Look at Superman, for example. People are sick and tired of seeing Lex Luthor, but they never stray from that. They never try any of the newer characters out, even though it would probably do great because it's totally different. People want to see different stuff, and that's why you're getting people coming to crowdfunding, and not just for comics, but for board games and books and all kinds of different stuff, because this is the only place where you've got the corporations out of the way, so you can try something, you can see if it works, and if it doesn't fund, well, let's go back to the drawing board. Amanda says, I agree with that, Pete. That's my preference, especially within crowdfunding sphere. Yeah, right. Hojo says, he's talking to publishing. Pete, each issue of self-contained adventure with threads leading to double-sized final issue, kind of like season TV. All killing. Yep, that's right. And it seems like you guys are kind of right along with what people want. I was looking at what was I looking at? I think it was a old Wolverine issue from John Buscema's run back when Wolverine was like, his first 10, 20 issues or whatever. Every single issue was just by itself a single thing. And even if it was a part of it, 2 parts or 3 parts, you could still, be fine with that issue. Of course, a lot of them had cliffhangers because, it was a monthly and they were stringing something along, but there was enough in one issue to really satisfy you. And then I go and I look at something like, I don't know, what's a good one? Batman Hush, right? And there were pages, sometimes I'd go 3-4 pages, and there would be like 5 word bubbles and a couple of captions. It's basically like you feel like you're, do you remember the Micro Machines guy that used to read really, really, really fast? Yeah, you feel like you're doing that, except they're reading, just blazing right through. Citizen Rona says that's pretty much what the music industry has done over the last 20 years, relying on legacy acts instead of investing in new talent, right? Or what they'll do is they'll just do a cover song or just make a bunch of music that sounds exactly like X talent from 20 to 30 to 40 years ago. Peep says truth is, it's not just comics, it's all printed media, newspapers, magazines, books. No one's found the answer yet, not even the big newspaper publishers. Okay, Comics says, what Pete said, I'm tired of the eternal to be continued in comics. I want what's contained within a book to tell a complete story, whether it's just 8 pages or 200. Yeah, and if I ever do, which I've got to get, I made a huge leap in Charlie's pages today for the little backup story I'm doing for her book, but I plan on eventually, like, maybe just doing it came out on a Wednesday, a little 4 to 8 page story. Seeing how that works, seeing if I've got the formatting right, if Pete likes it, and then if that works, I don't know, maybe another one. And then if that works, if that's something you guys want to see, because I don't want to waste your time, maybe I'll pitch a one-shot, a complete just one story kind of thing like that. And if that works, I mean, well, that's far enough out. We got, you don't want to get too dang many goals. You want to start small, fix that, get that done, move on to the next thing, right? And if you start to really get momentum, then you can start making some grander plans. That's my thoughts, because I mean, I'm in comic strips, right? I'm a thinking a little bit smaller guy, while I'm thinking of the big picture. But we'll see what happens. Hey, maybe That's why Wraith of God has been so successful. It's a complete story in watching. Yeah, Aaron does like 80-page books. It's crazy, but a good thing. But who knows? Maybe by next year I'll be a grand enemy of comics and stuff. Maybe I'll just be like, all right, I've had it. I'm gonna burn this whole thing down. I can't even keep up with that joke. It's it's ridiculous. No, I'll always be a comics fan, whether or not I want to, be somebody that creates them rather than just maybe illustrating or something like that. I don't know. It's a situation that will dictate when I actually get there. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think it'll always be part of what I do, but you just never know. Like Charlie Chaplin used to get so angry because silent movies died. He put his whole life towards those. And then they got dropped for talkies. They went away. Nobody really brought them back. Not until, I suppose like independent guys maybe do them, but the Artist in 2000 did it, and it won an Oscar, and then everything went away again. Dr. Crow says, I want to do heroes like there were in cartoons from the 90s and 2000, where they fought weird monsters and villains that were pure imagination, not just dude in power armor. Right. And that's, I think that's one of those things where, how do I put this? There have been a lot of superheroes done. So while they can be done, it's tough to find a good spin, that hasn't been done. That isn't like, oh, they did this 3 different times across Marvel and DC, like that's where you gotta be careful. You gotta like take a couple extra zigs and zags. You maybe lead people to think, hey, I know what's gonna happen. This is gonna whoa, that is not what I expected to happen. Because there's an awful lot of that out there, and surprising the reader is getting a little tougher, at least I think in superheroes and possibly even in horror. Surprising the reader, and I suppose that's not always the goal. I think comics can be comfort food. You know what I mean? Like giving them what they actually want in terms of like, it's not predictable. It's what I want. I want to see. I know the hero is going to win, and I know he's going to do it this way. I want to see it happen. I want to see it done, and I never get tired of it. Sometimes that's how it is. Some comics are comfort food, don't you think? I think superheroes, in the way that they're done, that is a comfort food kind of thing. I think the deconstruction part isn't as much. Not for me, at least. Because you're if you're not like engaged in what it is, you're kind of going like, I don't like this. This doesn't make me feel easy, especially when it's like all the characters are unlikable. Dr. Crow says, I look at my main inspiration, Powerpuff Girls, and that they would fight a bratty rich girl, a monkey, and then a devil, and it felt natural when they would play a game inside of a rainy day. Right. That was... The Powerpuff Girls are that whole era is an interesting time in cartoons, because it started to get away from like it was like a half and half, I think, because there was a point where you had those non sequitur kind of things. At the time, it felt fresh. It felt very new because everybody was doing storytelling type stuff. They were doing like G.I. Joe and Thundercats and Batman and that, that kind of, well, those are more 80s, but Batman, like stuff that required a story. And then you get the stuff where there's just like Earthworm Jim style humor, where you're standing there and you turn and it's like, oh my gosh, there's a cow eating celery. Why is he eating celery? That's so out the wall and different, weird. And then he pulls a gun. What? And then that became so dang popular and so easy because Family Guy and stuff like that did it too. But really, you didn't have to really write. You just go from joke to joke. and there's your story. Maybe there's an underlying story, but I think that stuff didn't age all that great, especially when you think about those cartoons where you watch them once and then you laugh, and then you try to watch them again, and it's just not the same. Now take that and put it next to something like G.I. Joe, Thundercats, Batman, Ghostbusters, any of those things from the 80s where they actually had to work to entertain you, to have stories. Those things keep on getting repackaged and rewatched and reshown. The other stuff, and I think I mentioned something about this, like Harley Quinn and MODOK. That stuff's gonna kind of join some of the other Cartoon Network kind of things in bargain bins and kind of forgotten. There's no shortcut to hard work and to good quality. Citizen Rona says it's always about the story. The art should serve the story. If you don't have a good story, you just have an art portfolio. Fair enough. Yeah. I was thinking about that a little bit too. There's always that immortal, what's more important, comics or writing in comics. That both are equally needed to make it a comic book. You can have some crappy writing with great art. What are you going to do? You're going to just flip through it every once in a while and never read it again. And if the writing is there, that's something, you can pull out probably and read. Mileage may vary. If you're Vanessa, of course, you're going to read, your Groken 10 times and wear it out, which is, I've said before, that's awesome. I want to see more people like that. I want to see more reactions to books like that. Holy crap, I read this and it blew me away. I had to read it again and I noticed different stuff. And then I read it again the next week and I had a great time with it again. And then I passed it to my kid and he read it and he was freaking out and drawing the stuff. DC Miller says, welcome to the chat. Longevity in the animation industry isn't even strived for anymore. No, I don't think so. I think it's all about what it is in the moment. And there are some. Well, actually, I don't know. The last one that I remember. The last one I remember, like, there was the Airbender. The last Airbender was one of those that seems to be enduring. I haven't watched it. That bird went full Wile E. Coyote. But I'm trying to think of, maybe you guys know something that's not manga or anime rather, that has really endured and that hasn't been like a 13 episode season and then just never come back, or something like that. Like, I kind of wonder if there are any out there anymore. Let's get some words on this thing. Hey, Tank Ferret, welcome to the chat. Never fly fast. That in there? Yeah, maybe I'll just I'll leave that last one. Oh, no, you know what we do? We do with this. Here, I'm going to go up and I'm going to show you a little something here. I'm going to take this and I'm going to erase this little thing right here. Right? And then we're going to go a little smaller. We're going to give it some flames. There we go. Peep says, sometimes it's the vibe something has that makes it cool or memorable for him. Even if the story is weak, especially with horror, if you can draw something into a world using a style and a tone, I love that. And, that's a certain thing with independent comics that I absolutely love, that you just, when you go into Marvel and DC, right, they've got a house style. I want everybody to draw like Jim Lee. I want everybody to draw like, whatever. And with the independent stuff, you actually get to see, like, say, I don't know, like the Max, or Scotty Young, or any number of things like that are very much based on the person's style. Kelly Jones, another great example. No, we don't like that. That's okay. Maybe I'm gonna move this down. Right, you got to put that right there, I suppose. Kelly Jones, yeah, he with Batman, like, his anatomy sometimes is a little different. It's a little exaggerated, but you're gonna know that's Kelly Jones, and it's always gonna be some sort of an interesting picture. That's good enough, I suppose. I'm gonna get that one too. There we go. Pete says sometimes that aspect is forgotten while writing, and it comes across a little cold and distant, even in the good story. Yeah, it's a heck of a balance for sure. All right, so let's put a little color on this. But I've been thinking a whole lot about just the nostalgia aspect of comics here, and I think that there's a lot of hang-ups on it. Yeah. People says Mignola, 3 pages of Hellboy, and you're in that world, right? He's got an atmosphere all his own. But I think one of the biggest problems for comics in my mind is that for newer creators, right? For older ones, there's still a magic, but they understand that very much it's a project to work on. It's something to get done. It's a job. It's it's a cool job, but it's a job, and you got to get it done. It's commercial art. It's not fine art. And that keeps them grounded to just sit down at the desk. And when you sit and you think, if you're going in for money, and that's your sole reason, don't do that. That comes with money, comes with dedication. It comes with good product, and it comes with passion. And of course, luck, a little bit of luck, a little bit of business sense. And then, eventually it'll take care of itself. But if you're going in there, it's a lot like YouTube. If you go in there specifically for views, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Of course, if you go in there and you're doing what you love and you're doing what you'll probably find an audience. Maybe it's not a big audience. Maybe it's a smaller but more passionate audience. Sometimes that's a little bit better. If you've got 1,000 people that really love you, that really love what you do and how you think, and they're going to buy what you're going to sell, if you're selling something, then you've got, let's just say you hit 80% of that, because some people, times are tough, they can't always buy and stuff, but you hit 80% of that with like a 90% participation. That's going to be a whole lot better than having 500,000 people, and, well, maybe that's a weird example, 500,000 people, and you get like 1% of that. That's still pretty decent. So, I mean, yeah, building the audience like that. But yeah, if you've got a huge number and there's a very, very small number of people that maybe will take a look at it or whatever like that, but if you've got a very small but constant audience, that could very well be much better. It's all about quality. Quantity helps, but it's all about quantity. Peeps says, didn't Yoda say that? Please say again. What am I saying again? Do or do not. There is no try. That was a ton of fun, but I got to go. See you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, OK Comics. Thank you for coming in and dropping by. All right. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Made him smile. But I personally, I think that's a mistake to. That's a mistake to romanticize a lot of this stuff. It really is. And we, planning these giant, so many people, I find these creators they're obsessed with world building, right? you know what I'm talking about. Like you see people saying, I'm planning my book. Oh, here's all the characters, here's the cast, and they've got everybody, it's almost like they're doing the Marvel's Who's Who, or the yearbook 9088 kind of thing. And world building is very, very fun, but it doesn't mean a whole lot if you can't apply it, right? So you've got people saying, oh, I got this character, this is this character's background. And they're kind of filling you in. I feel like it's almost like an attempt to get the origin out of the way so that they can just get into stories. That bird would look good with aviation goggles and a cap. I know I've done that before. I figured it was an oversight. I think Stat felt he didn't need him. He could handle it. There's no problem. It's a rocket pack, for goodness sake. Let's see here. Put that there. Gotta get that little detail. There. And he's kind of in space, isn't he? But like I was saying, I think it was on a Kayla thing today. Like she had a. But origin stories are so much fun. It's true. They are fun, but I think it's a specific kind of thing that you don't necessarily need to. This is my view here. You don't need to start at the beginning all the time. Sometimes it's a good thing to start right in the middle of a day, because you are coming into a character's right in the middle of their day, and then like eke that origin out a little bit at a time. Look at Wolverine. How long did he go before they created an origin? And most people didn't like it. But he and characters like Gambit were really enduring because nobody knew anything about them. They just showed up. They were mysterious, pretty well written in some cases. And we didn't need that. Manga, same thing. They don't always have an origin. That book that I've got, Domu, right? It's about a little girl who's got psychic powers, and telekinetic powers, and she's fighting this horrible old man that murders people for their stuff, kind of like a Freddy Krueger style situation. They don't talk about how they got their telekinetic powers. That's the story. They've got telekinetic powers. You can deal with it. There's no origin. Okay, so they're fighting. Boom, done. I do think that you see a lot of people having fun world building, and again, it is very, very fun. But world building and putting that in, plugging it into a story, that's a little bit different. That's a little more difficult. And if you start with a small story, you've got some guy. Let's just say, for example, you got some guy trying to clean out a goblin infestation from his basement. You got two characters right there. You got the guy and, say, the race of goblins. That's two. Then he goes out the next story and he's in his barn and it's haunted. Well, you got three characters right there. And you've got the house in the barn. Then he goes into town and he deals with something. He got like the hardware store owner. You got the lady that stops to talk to him. That's two more characters right there, plus a town. Then the guy he's got to go to the graveyard for some reason. You got another setting, and you get to meet a couple more characters there. It slowly builds itself. You could take a little piece at a time, a little story at a time, a little issue at a time, and before you know it, you've got an entire world of people. You've created 30 characters. You've got 4 or 5 different towns that you've created. Oh no, there's a space. You've brought space into it. Now you've got a whole universe opened up. That's I think the best way to build a universe. You don't need to. You can have your plans. You can have your 2-year plan just for yourself, or 3-year plan, or whatever like that. Like, okay, I want to get in a story with going into like the Arctic eventually, but that's going to be way down. You want to start small and roll it down a hill, right? And it's going to gather on its own. Don't start with such a big, overwhelming thing, because what's going to happen is you are going to either get really excited and spoil everything that's coming down the line, right? Or you're going to decide, oh, you know what? This stuff's not as good as the stuff that's coming. I'll just abandon this and I'm going to go on to something new. And then you start writing multiple stories at once, and then you go from one project to another, you get bogged down, and before you know it, you've got 3 or 4 issues that are about 30% done a piece, and you got an idea for a new story, and it's a terrible, terrible, terrible habit to get into. And that's something that plagues newer people all the time. Okay, you got to start small. You start your focus small on a small thing, a single character with a single thing going on, and then build from there, right? You can have new characters come in. If that character's popular, use them a few more times. If you want to do a spin-off, a single issue or something like that, wait until you have a decent move ahead, like on your other stuff. If you can get far enough ahead to just pop out a quick side issue, which I would just go ahead and say keep it in the main story and don't overuse them, right? Because then you can always bring them back and they'll always be happy to see them. Sorry, I went on a spiral. Let's see what the chat's going on. Dr. Crow says origin stories are so much fun. They are, but I mean, I think eking them out over a long period of time keeps the audience engaged. People says Viz characters have zero origin or Beano, all great. Absolutely. You just get them in there and people get to know them as just like a normal person. Like you get in there and people get to know you a little bit at a time. Pete says 100%. Pete says, that's why I keep telling people focus on characters, conflict, and setting for their stories. The 3 things, the holy trinity of storytelling. Absolutely. Citizen Rana says, origin stories today are, where on the doll did the bad guy hurt you? But, it's a thing where people want to know. They, naturally want to know what happened. Why did this person be like this? So if you just give them that origin story right away, it kind of like you cut a lot of potential out. And I think that was probably a holdover from like the 40s and 50s, right? Where you'd have like those Showcase Presents or something like that, where you would have 8 pages. You'd have a book with 5 or 6 stories in it, 8 pages a piece. And you'd put that out there and people would be like, oh my gosh, I love Green Lantern. Let's have more Green Lantern. So Green Lantern gets his own book, right? That's the origin stories. They throw out it's like a pitch. Those things were like pitches back in the day. 8 pages. Like, okay, so this alien comes down. I sounded like J. Jonah Jameson. Okay, so this alien comes down and he's dying and he gives this ring to this pilot and this pilot now fights crime. What do you think about that? Audience says, I freaking love it. Let's do it. So then they've got a character. And then right next to that is like, okay, so we got this ice cream man and he's running around. He's fighting crime. Right? And everybody goes, what? An ice cream? No, that's no good. So he gets forgotten. And Green Lantern goes on to be the character that everybody wants to read. I think that may be something to like America's obsession with origin stories. That and, every movie comes out, they've got to rehash the same origin story. How many times has Spider-Man or Superman had, been retold? So we got your Citizen Rona says, origin stories today are, oh yeah, I read that. Dr. Crow says, I was stuck in the 5 issues being 30% done. Got to the point where I just archived them. Focus on one and only one. That's right. Absolutely. Pete says what Pete said. Blue Teddy, hello, afternoon, everybody. He says, welcome to the chat. It's something that I see constantly. Or you have a writer situation being like you have something that's pretty much, the story's pretty much done, and then they get really hung up on this quirk of a character, and they're like, "Ooh, I need to explore this psychological trauma." You really don't, or you use it for a later issue. It's an interesting thing. Once you get an idea, you don't have to use it right now. Pop it in a notebook and squirrel it away for later for something else. If this is intended to go on for however long, years, decades, you can use these ideas. You just need to have a little bit of time to fit them all together like a puzzle. You don't have to include the kitchen sink in the first issue. You get to that later. That's what I be preaching. Dr. Crow says, I've been listening to Thai radio drama called The Red Panda. We never get his origin story. We never know why he dedicated himself to crime fighting. We get his sidekick, but not Red Panda. Right. You don't need it. Sometimes it's makes for an interesting tid point. Hey, Blue, how you doing? Okay. Yeah, sometimes it makes for a little bit of an interesting tidbit of like, oh wow, it's like somebody you've known for a long time, but you don't really know anything about their past, and then all of a sudden one day they just start saying, I was in this place 5 years ago, and they tell you this story, and you're like, wow, holy crap. And then, they go back to just talking about the stuff that's going on in the day, and then next week they maybe say, a few years ago, I met this guy, and then they tell you this another crazy story, and it's interesting versus somebody coming in and just telling you their life story from childhood on up. You tend to go, okay, well, see ya. Some people at any rate. Well, we got us a good show today. It's about that hour mark. This thing's freaking out. Here we go. This is a quick comic strip just to give you guys something to look at while I talked. They said I'd never fly fast. I'm about to show them all. Boom. And then the thing goes right through. That's the gag. It's very Acme. It's very Looney Tunes, but hey, they can't all be deep, like thoughtful comic strips. Sometimes you gotta give like a funny gag just to break things up a little bit, Blue Teddy says, I love the backstory, but in small bits, like unlocking it in the video game as you get closer to the character. Susan Rona says, came out great. Thanks very much. So, what do we got? We're winding down. We're going to cut the music. So it's just me and you. Shh, quiet. It's one of those quiet streams. No, it's not really not. You know me. One of these days, I'm going to learn to talk slower for you. I'll maybe listen to a bit more radio and, take forever to get to the point as opposed to talking at my normal speed and putting a 2-hour show into an hour show. People says, give things time to stew in your mind. When you're in the zone, the ideas click one at a time. Takes a while, but it's worth it. The character will dictate the writing if you give them breath. Yes, that's exactly right. And I hope you listening are inspired to go do something. I hope you listening on replay are inspired to maybe get back at it if you put something on the shelf. I'm going to go on a little bit of a walk. Maybe I'm going to get some work done today. It's a beautiful day outside, so why waste it? Why not enjoy it a little bit? Don't spend all your time at the desk. You can get out and get a little fresh air. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming and visit me again. I never know who's going to show up, but you guys keep doing that. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.